Welcome to Draft Sickos on the No Ceilings NBA YouTube channel and podcast feed. This is the show where we discuss everybody from the biggest of names to the deepest of sleepers. I'm your host, Maxwell Baumbach, and I am joined, as always, by the real star of the show, Stephen Gillespie. Stephen, how are you doing this week?
Maxwell, I'm excited. Basketball is meaningful in college, and we're almost to meaningful NBA games, which is fun.
Yeah.
And spring break is almost over, which means the kids go back to school, which means I get more time at the house in the middle of the day on my lunch break. So I'm excited for all of the fun that is going on right now at this particular season. How is everything on your end, man? I know that we did a show last week. It's good that we have some consistency now.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Yeah, it's nice, man. It's really good. Everything's good over here. Yeah, like you said, I had such a hard time with the NBA's like Mickey Mouse March this year, where it's just like I want to watch some of these games, and then like it can be rough. It can be rough. So I'm
Teams
glad
are trying their best to make you not to. You know?
Yeah, I'm so glad to get back not to just like meaningful basketball, but like the most meaningful basketball.
Yes.
So I'm ready for that whiplash effect of like, oh man, actually like this type of player is not valuable at all. Like they get eaten alive when the game matters. So I'm excited to get back to that and help me kind of set my standards a little bit better, because I worry in March sometimes. Like I'm watching these NBA games and there's guys that are, average G League players that are looking like ballers out there. So it helps to get some real ball going back. But yeah, we are toward the end of the NCAA tournament. We're going to talk about a lot of guys that we just saw play yesterday in the Final Four, and a few guys that we basically just got our last impression of. We're going to start off with Knueppel from Duke. Probably the preseason player I was most wrong about as far as undervaluing them. Khan was a guy, we'll talk about prospect journey with him. But for the people that are just kind of tuning into the draft stuff now, Knueppel is a freshman at Duke. He is listed at 6'7". I'm a little bit dubious of that personally. But 217 has a big, strong body on him. Averaged 14.4 points per game this season, shooting 47.9% from the field, 40.6% from three on 5.3 attempts per game, and he was a 91.4% free throw shooter. The shooting is the big sell with Khan. It was the big sell with him going into the year. He shot an exceptional percentage throughout his high school career. So the question was really, was that going to translate up? And then how valuable was everything else going to be? The next big thing with him is the playmaking. Averaged 2.7 assists, only 1.4 turnovers, also averaged 4 rebounds per game, had 1.0 steals and 0.2 blocks per game. So that's where you get into some of the challenges, is where is this guy going to stack up defensively? I was super leery of Khan coming to the year. Like I just thought like, this is a guy, I don't like how he moves. I don't like how he creates space. I don't like how he gets downhill. I get that.
I hate the way he looks.
Yeah. But no, it was also just like, I totally bought the idea that he could hit shots. It was just like, is it enough? Like, is it valuable? Is he really going to hit shots? Because he has to like really, really hit shots. Can the secondary stuff be effective at all? Can he get to spots anywhere else on the court? Or is he just going to be a guy that like really shoots threes, but like is a little too small, a little too slow to impact much else? Man, I've just really been won over by Khan throughout the year. I think what started to win me over was early in the year when a shot wasn't going in, and he was still just like a profoundly positive player in terms of his ability to make decisions. I think his first step was a little bit more impressive than I'd anticipated being coming into the year. He found ways to become a really effective rim finisher, despite not being the most, vertically sound athlete. He only had 2 total dunks on the year, but he still made 62% of his half-court rim attempts. So he still managed to make things work on that front. Really nice read of the floor, sees everything on the go. And just, can make quick decisions, can finish with either hand. And I thought showed some interesting things defensively. Where were you with Khan coming into the year, and how are you feeling about him at this stage?
I feel like I was pretty skeptical on Khan coming in. It's funny because it's every draft cycle, Maxwell, there's these players that you kind of like Team Edward or Team Jacob, that you have to be on these guys. You remember it was Khalil Ware and Derek Lively a couple cycles ago. This year, it was Khan and Liam to me, and I found myself coming into the year more high on Liam. I was more into the size. I felt like the shooting variety was a little bit better. Colin didn't strike me as imposing at all. I have in my notes, Maxwell, that he's at 6'5", and what I like to do is I'll grab these heights and stuff before college teams have a chance to really fudge the numbers.
Yeah.
He might be closer to 6'5", but people still grow. You know, at age, he's only going to be 19 once he's drafted, so that's kind of nice. I struggled, though. I struggled with the athleticism, which I still now think is a fair concern. I struggled with the defensive projection, which, again, I still think is a fair concern. Now, Maxwell, you and I think might have him at the exact same spot. I have him at 9 on my board.
Okay. Yeah, so I've got him in a similar place. He is a firm top 10 for me. I think there's a world where I could end up with him. It's deep dive season, so I'm about to get a little bit more finality on these rankings. Absolutely. I think I've mentioned this throughout the year, but I go a lot more eye test and then just kind of do all the data all at once. Like I look at it throughout the year. It's not like I'm like, I will not go on Synergy. I will not go on Basketball Reference. Like I'm not doing that. I'm aware. Numbers. Yeah, I'm aware of what the numbers are, and I keep a gauge on them, and I look at them from time to time, but I don't, really get super into the weeds on it until the sample is complete. And now for Khan it is. I can see myself going like as high as 5 potentially. What I really want to look at as much as his numbers is like how many guys in this mold hit that high of an NBA ceiling. Like how many NBA like second and third options are still like that far behind the curve defensively as wings. Like it's just like a real thing I need to just spend time kind of digging into. But yeah, so I think what is like for sure NBA translatable is the shot. So Knueppel took over 10 threes for 100 possessions, ended the year shooting 40.6% from 3. He actually took more and made more threes in conference play as well. So really great stuff there. Really like the decision making, again, like how he can move the ball quickly. I worry about the finishing a little bit with him. Like the numbers are really good, but we see it all the time where like certain guys are better finishers in college than they are in the NBA. Like the example I always go to is Marcus Zagorowski being a better finisher than Tyrese Maxey in their pre-draft years. Where like Zagorowski was like, nothing special, but he had like the timing, the pace of the game down because he'd been in college for longer. Where like Maxey's a blur. Like Maxey was tailor-made for the ability to finish at the NBA, given just his speed, his lift, his craftiness, all of that. Like he was just better suited to finishing in the NBA. With Khan, it feels like so much of his finishing is like, all right, I got chased off the line, and now I'm going to throw a bunch of pump fakes at the rim to get a big man off their feet. And like that can work, but I just wonder like when defenses are going to have time to recover, and that's on the scouting report, and bigs know to just like stay grounded against you. Like, are you still going to be able to win in that particular way? Do you have any thoughts on that? Like, I feel like that's like the one scoring element where I'm just like, man, I would feel so much better if a lot of these rim attempts were like, I am straight to the rim with 2 big strides up off 1 foot, and it's a conversion with, one hand, instead of like, it's 3 steps, it's a pump fake twice at the rim until the big guy gets off their feet and I'm beating him with my timing. Like that can work. I just don't know how much I like that being like the go-to thing at the rim.
Well, I feel like he does do that, but it's on offensive rebounds. Like he is actually like a pretty sound rebounder, not anything otherworldly, but I think that he rebounds well enough to where you feel comfortable with that NBA projection, because Maxwell, something you and I often talk about is how much rebounding is actually an indicator of success at the next level. Khan does it enough, especially those offensive rebound putback, to where maybe there's something there. But like you, I do worry about his interior scoring at the next level, but I don't necessarily think that's going to be his role, which is why I do have him top 5 at the latter half of the top 5. And I might be comfortable putting him as high as like maybe 6, 7, somewhere in that neighborhood. But that's where you really start getting some very vertical tiers, like very clear line of demarcation tiers and prospects. So when you hear someone say his highest top 5 and someone's like, I don't know, like maybe 7, that's only 2 numbers away short. In terms of tier, that's a huge difference, right? I'm such a big believer in the shot, because the ball comes out of his hands so quick, so pure, and it's so repeatable. I love his relocation ability. I love that he can do it a little bit off of the bounce. I love that he's got some vision to complement it to where when the ball does get to his hand, a coach can feel comfortable knowing that Khan isn't just going to be a play finisher, like the offense can flow through him. One thing that I really come to appreciate is that while I'm not a big fan of Maxwell, like you were saying, is like when he gets to the paint, he has to do this, this, and this. I was worried about him even getting into the paint. The fact that he can, the fact that he can dribble and get to the paint, I think is encouraging. And we've long, lamented the fact that Duke hasn't had a traditional point guard, and we saw that come up being a detriment to them in March Madness. But the good thing I will say about Khan's development is that I think he learned more on-ball stuff in high-leverage situations to where if I'm an NBA team, I have to be encouraged of where I felt like he was going to come into the season being one way, where he's ending the season is otherworldly better. So you feel comfortable that that trajectory could continue to go up, that there might be more on-ball reps that you can trust him with, and that he is trying to figure out how to score in the paint against high leverage competition. The fact that he's even getting himself into that position, I think, is encouraging. That's why I put in the group chat the other day, Max, I was like, I feel so stupid that I ever doubted him. But I think that Khan is a perfect example. Excuse me while I drop my headphone. Khan is such a perfect example that in-season progression and development does exist, and that does need to be accounted for whenever we're saying where we were and where we are now.
Yeah, and I want to be like cautious about the finishing thing, because like, who else like didn't get to the rim much in college and really struggled there was Jalen Wells. You know what I mean? So it's like, I don't know. Like I'm like just wondering, like with the current NBA era, like I always like remind myself, like twos are for stars. Most guys are just shooting threes now in this era. Yeah, so I think this is all interesting. Let's talk about the defense, because we're getting a lot of like in the chat, and we can get to these in a little bit, like Connor Trey Johnson, Connor McNeely. I worry a lot about the defense still. So
I do too.
I think the point of attack stuff can be fine when it's like the possession is a guy trying to hunt him. I think that he's actually like pretty good at. Like I think he's pretty good when he can use his hands a little bit. He has good awareness around ball screens. He can make guys wear his body. He's like pretty disciplined. He stays square. I like that off the ball. Like he's a good pointer and communicator. Where I struggle is I think the ground coverage is bad. Like I just don't think he gets places very quickly. His balance isn't great. And he struggles a lot against sudden directional changes. So if it's a situation where he's got to cover ground to close out, he's going to be a little bit slow to get there. And then if the guy drives at him, like he's not getting back in that play. Like he is going to get blown by and left in the dust when it's bigger athletes, if he is not able to bump that person off their line. Like if they have a way to get around him, he is in deep trouble. I think he's a little easy to get around at the point of attack in general at times too. Like, but I really worry about ground coverage and closeouts. Like those are the two things in particular where I'm just like, this is where it could get a little bit ugly. And like, there really needs to be some development and growth. And that's where I'm like, when I think about it more, that's where I'm like, 5 is dicey. 5 is dicey if we're talking about a wing in the modern NBA and you're worried about like, can he get to spots on the court fast enough defensively? Like that's, I don't know. Like we talked about Dalton Connect a lot last year, and with Dalton, like there were some real like technical deficiencies on defense. There were some lapses, but it's like, I at least know that like physically he can get places. Where like with Khan, like I think Khan is a much more sound, smart, fundamental player than Connect was a year ago, but like physically, it's just like, is he going to be a little too far behind that curve? That like then he's more in like the mega bench player role.
And that's why I'm more comfortable having him like in this back half of the top 10, like 9-10 range. I feel very comfortable because you can kind of say, well, he's so gifted offensively and he competes that I feel good taking him in this range. Once you start getting, like we were talking about, like higher up in those tiers, you really have to start saying, is there any possible way that I feel confident that Khan is going to be an integral part to our offense? Like, if he is not on the floor, the way that we play changes. I don't know about that. And a lot of that does have to do with the defense. That's why I was so down on him in the first place. It was because, cool, you can shoot. What else can you do? Well, the defense didn't step come along like I had wanted to. Obviously, you're not going to get athletic in the ACC as a freshman. You're not going to get more athletic. So there was that. Because he was so much more dynamic with the ball in his hands, he could, when Cooper was missing games, Khan kept that engine, chugging along. That's why I feel more confident about him. But yeah, that defense, Maxwell, you put it perfectly. I don't know how I feel about him navigating screens. I don't know how I feel about him, operating around a DHO or these guards who are going to kick it to the elbow and run off of flares or relocate for a three. All those like cagey guard movements that he's going to have to defend. Height is going to be another big thing too.
Yeah, how
Because
he measures is going to be so important.
it will be, because are there smaller players in the NBA who can get away with playing like these typical forward or big man roles? Yes, but they are mega athletes, right? Like Khan is just not at that level. He's going to have to compete. Can he get to be like a Sam Hauser type defender in the NBA? Maybe, but the reason why Sam Hauser works is because he's got a little bit more length and tools to work with on that side of the ball, where Khan may or may not. He is built kind of funnily to me. I said he's like a guard version of like what Luke Arangodi was for Notre Dame way back when. And he competes, which you want to buy the competitive nature. Effort is a tool and a skill, especially in the NBA regular season. I think that he's serviceable enough, but it's because of the offensive role. Defense, I'm really worried about. But he does try, he does compete, and that's got to count for something.
So where do you feel about him relative to Liam McNeely and Trey Johnson? So I will have him ahead of Liam McNeely. Like, I'm just going to say
Easily.
that now. Like, I think I'm like backing off of Liam McNeely pretty hard.
Absolutely.
I think like obviously like, he was in a far from ideal role. I think you could also say that about Khan, the way that like this year unfolded, where it's like he had to take on a lot more playmaking than you probably would have anticipated preseason, given the number of junior, senior, and even like sophomore guards that Duke had on this roster. With Liam, it's just another guy who's like not a great defender, like really bad at the rim. Like I trust Khan a lot more in a lot of areas. With Trey is like the interesting one to me, where it's like Trey also is not a great separator. I think he plays through contact at the rim a lot worse. I think his process can be far more frustrating. Like I think Khan is the superior passer and offensive decision maker. I think both of them, like both of my concerns with both of them is defense. I think where I feel better about Trey defensively is that Trey is more of a passive but capable defender, where Trey's just not going to try to jump a passing lane. He's not going to be super aggressive, like hunting a block or whatever, but he's just kind of like always in the right spots, holds up pretty well physically, got a good body on him, that it's like, I wish there was a whole lot more like assertiveness at him. And like, there's definitely a bit of a tools deficit relative to like NBA, like combo guard wing kind of guys, but it's easier for me to imagine Trey Johnson defending in a playoff series than Knueppel at this point. And that's where it's like, I don't know. Like, I like Khan offensively better. I just feel better about what Trey's working with body-wise.
My thing is that Texas just fired their head coach for how terrible of a job that they did relative to the talent that they had on that team, where I'm a little bit more forgiving with Trey, because this is where, Maxwell, you remember last week I said I weirdly think that intelligence is sometimes overvalued, because there are a lot of smart players that just can't do things at the next level, to where you have to have natural gifts and abilities. There's like that requirement, that threshold. I think Trey meets that. I think that he has like nuclear scoring potential. I do feel like the playmaking, though it wasn't as consistent as what Khan got to do, there was opportunity for Khan to get to do it, whereas Trey was more away from the ball, play finisher at Texas. I think that there's just so much more that you could get from Trey, and I think that he crosses a lot more athletic and measurable thresholds that you're just not going to get from Khan, which is why I have Trey at like that 5'6" range, and I have Khan at that like 9-10 range.
Yeah.
Liam, I'm like you. Someone in the chat earlier is like, when was the conversation ever? Is it Liam or is it Khan? Well, it was before the season, whenever you're doing your preseason evaluations. There was a very close conversation. It really was.
Yeah.
Liam
and
is bigger.
I would say too, like I had Liam higher throughout a lot of the year just because I was kind of giving him the benefit of the doubt. And I think as the year went on, I just like really started to doubt the level of offensive firepower while still having a lot of the same defensive concerns that we're talking about with Khan.
Yeah, and the assignments aren't due yet. You know, they're still even now, even though the tournament's almost over, like we're about to be going in the combine and intel season. We're going to go back and do these dives that we frequently reference. I just did a dive. Like I just smashed my big board with a sledgehammer and just kind of repieced it back together. And that's where I grew in my affinity for Khan, is because I really sat down and individually gave all these guys a little bit more extra effort that I normally don't do at this point of the season. And that's where I really started recognizing like all the on-ball stuff that Khan has grown throughout the rest of it compared to Liam McNeely, who also didn't have great guard play. Solo ball is a phenomenal shooter, but he's not an ideal facilitator yet. He's still got time to grow into that. Liam, oddly enough, was kind of given similar opportunity, but was nowhere near as efficient. The rebounding didn't blow me away. The defense didn't blow me away. He's taking an astronomical number of threes per 100 and hitting, I think, at like a 32% three-point percentage, where Khan is just on fire, right? So really looking at it that way, I would say Trey with a bullet, because of the athletic and tools potential that he just has that you're not going to get from either one of Khan or Liam. Then I would say a couple steps down, you got Khan. And then way back at the end of my first round, maybe beginning of my second round, you got Liam McNeely.
Yeah, I'm in a similar spot. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to talk about Knueppel's teammate, Khaman Maluach, as well as the name that's hot in the streets right now, Walter Clayton Jr. So stick with us. We'll be right back. All right, let's talk about Khaman Maluach. This is like such a departure from like the players that we were just talking about, because like we were basically talking about like three guys that got thrust into like, we needed to do a whole lot more than you probably thought you were going to have to do. Like three guys.
Yeah, we're going to need you to stay late today. You know,
three of those guys had that. Where with Khaman, it was like the opposite. It was like, look, we saw the Basketball Africa League tape. We saw you shooting threes. We saw you making some interesting passes at Basketball Without Borders. Here, you're going to dunk. Like, it was just kind of the opposite. Now, here's where Khan is interesting. So, I'm sorry, Khaman Maluach. Again, for the newcomers who are just dropping in, he is a 7'2", 250-pound center out of Duke, freshman, late to playing basketball. I think he's only played 4 or 5 years. Not a
it depends on where you start your calendar of playing time. He's at most around like 5 years.
Okay. 8.6 points per game this year, which you're like, he's 7'2" and he scored 8.6 points per game. He shot 71.2% from the field. He will also take the occasional three, which he made 25% of, and he's got great touch at the free throw line, 76.6% at this charity stripe, which is a phenomenal number for a big man. Phenomenal for a big man his age. Good on the glass, 6.6 rebounds per game, 2.7 of which came on the offensive glass. I'm sure we're going to talk about the rebounding in a minute, given what happened yesterday. Passing playmaking was not something he really got much of an opportunity to do this year. He had 0.5 assists to 0.8 turnovers. Shot blocking was good. He had 1.3 blocks per game and 0.2 steals. Khaman, I feel like, is one of the more, he's becoming really divisive. I feel like
rightfully so.
I get the upside predicament of like, this guy is 7'2". He's got like a 7'9", I think, wingspan is the number that's out there. Arms are super, super long. He just takes up so much space on the court defensively in ball screen coverages that he's one of those guys where it's like, if you want to technically pick nits and how he's positioned or whatever, like, go right ahead. That's stuff that he's going to figure out. And he is so much bigger than so many guys that a lot of times it doesn't even matter. I don't love his timing as a shot blocker. I've mentioned throughout the year, I feel like he goaltends more than just about any prospect I've ever seen. 6.8 block rate is a good number, but it's lower than you would like from somebody with his tools. Also on like a good shot blocking team. like playing next to Cooper Flag. So it's like maybe some of the, weak side help numbers kind of ate into that. But yeah, defensively, I think like pretty safe projection as far as like this guy's really big. He's going to take up space. He's going to protect the rim. Not terrible. Like when he has to slide his feet in space either. Like really, really solid big man stuff. And also not a guy who fouls a whole lot. Like 5.8 fouls per 100 is not terrible for a freshman big. Offensively, it's simple. The man dominates the offensive glass. He had a 16.5 offensive rebound rate, which is like elite. One of the best numbers I've tracked that puts him in like Day'Ron Sharpe, Jalen Duren like category as far as guys that live on the offensive glass. Really great finisher, has some nice touch when it's not a dunk. Don't know how much I trust the ball skills. Don't know how much I trust the idea that he is going to be a knockdown jump shooter or anything like that. So those are the positives. What would you say you like about Khaman Maluach's game? And then we'll get into some of the kind of the criticisms and concerns and maybe the downside arguments. So I think the upside argument is like safe tools in production bet to be a good defender, safe tools in production bet to be a good offensive player. Maybe the jump shot comes around. Maybe there's a little bit more passing juice than we got to see. And he can be like a dynamic 5-out big man on offense who puts a lid on the rim defensively. Like I get why people would be super into that idea. What are you liking with Maluach?
I'm going to try really hard, Maxwell, to color inside the lines that you just gave me there.
Sure,
I'm going to try really hard. I wrote about him February 20th, and this was in a piece that I entitled "Unicorns Aren't Real," right? Mm-hmm. And it's because there's such an infatuation with three-point shooting, ball skill, all these other things that you want from a big man, when historically speaking, even recent history, these big men that consensus is significantly lower on because they are big, because they have the tools, because they are good at typical big man things, they're more safe bets than you would realistically think. And I think that the thing if I'm speaking for myself, the thing that I am most positive on Maluach is his trajectory, his developmental trajectory. We spoke about the 4 to 5 years, somewhere in that neighborhood of basketball play. You want to give him a lot of credit because he established himself as the number one big man prospect within his class with only playing organized basketball for that amount of time. And it's really hard to do that. And it's hard to find a big man that is coordinated, that can run without it looking like it hurts him. You really like to see that from a big man. You love the activity. I think one thing that he gets a lot of love for is the defending in open space. And I think that is good because that projects him to be a more switch friendly, like maybe show while there's a switch until that guy's defender comes back over to him. And then you go back to being a rim deterrent, which he can do. There's a thought process that the blocking numbers aren't that high because a lot of teams don't want to try him. And I think that there's debate there. But if I'm looking at things that I like, it's that in such a short amount of time, he's proven himself to be one of the best players at his position. And he's had moments of showing that even outside of the college basketball landscape.
Yeah. I think that's all completely fair and spot on. Let's talk about some of the concerns now, and then we'll kind of level set at the end and be like, all right,
okay.
here's where we're at, because I'm like ultimately still pretty in on the Khaman Maluach experience. So the downsides defensively, I already kind of touched on. Like timing, like just goaltends a lot. He is not a good defensive rebounder. He had 0 rebounds in 21 minutes against Houston yesterday, which is something that has been beaten to death if you follow along on social media. One of those days where like I'm glad I have a kid, so I'm not just like looking at my phone all day. And like I've already seen too many Khaman Maluach tweets, like in the times I did look at my phone. Like just doesn't get after it the same way on the defensive glass. He had a 19.2 defensive rebound rate, which is like lower 30-ish percentile among like bigs who stick in the NBA. It's usually more you're like Evan Mobley, Derek Lively, like skinny guy who might play some 4. Like generally that's more what you're looking at when we're talking about that type of defensive rebounding production. Not a guy who's like 7'2" and like very much around the basket, very much guarding centers all the time. I think a lot of it is positioning. I just don't think he's in the right spots a lot. He's gotten killed for his hands this year, and I think like somewhat rightfully so. Like he bobbles the ball a lot. But I think the bigger issue is just a lot of times he doesn't secure positioning. He's not looking to get into positioning. And then he's just sort of batting for the ball against other people. And when you don't catch everything, like a lot of times you lose out. And that's sort of where the issue is. Now we've seen on the offensive glass, when he does take a proactive approach to, I'm going to get positioning, he can win. So I think there is some upside here as a defensive rebounder. It's something that needs to get better. To be frank, it needs to be better given how he's going to look positionally. But it's not a great situation right now. And then offensively, it's kind of the same thing for me with the hands, where there's a lot of times where he gets fed and he bobbles the ball, and then it takes a second, the defense gets to recover. It just worries me a little bit. The NBA is a game of microseconds, and a lot of times, like, that's all a defense needs to recover and get somebody in position and make your look a whole lot harder. So that's sort of my big kind of hang up areas with Maluach. I also think, like, I kind of wish he set in his screens a little bit harder, and I wish he made himself available for lobs more often, because a lot of times they didn't find him when he was rolling, but his hands were down. It's like, get your hands up, call for that lob. So little nitpicky things there at the end. But what are your concerns with Maluach? Do you have similar ones, different ones? Where are you at?
So my notes, actually, I saw BTB in the chat. Shout out to everybody who's tuning in and hanging out, watching the show. Really appreciate y'all spending some time with us. BTB in the chat said the vibe shifted after that Houston game. My notes that I have for him right now are sans Houston game. I'm going to be talking about more of that tomorrow when I do like the national tournament preview. I'm going to dive into that game in particular. But even against Alabama, he had a very Khaman Maluach game where he switched out onto the perimeter. And I know that a lot of people love that. I love that too. I also want him to do the big man things when he's not switched out on the perimeter. And I don't know how much natural instinct he has on defense. And he's relatively new to the game, which might play a big part of that. I think a lot of this is coaching. But I also think that a lot of his positive positioning is coaching as well, because there was one play against Alabama that I really want to sink my teeth into, Maxwell. And I don't know if you saw this play or how much time you invested in this one particular play. We didn't talk about this, so I'm kind of putting you on the spot.
Yeah, sure.
There was a play where Maluach gets switched on to Mark Sears and the ball, and he does a good job of closing the door on him, which this is where if you're pro Khaman Maluach, you're like, awesome, this is what I would love to see. The ball gets kicked out to Chris Youngblood on the right wing. Maluach goes back to his man, which at this time was Grant Nelson, who is parked in the opposite side corner. So Khaman Maluach is in prime position to where he can be like this roaming rim protector, paint deterrent. He is parked on the weak side block to where Youngblood, as he's driving to the basket, he's in perfect position to where he can challenge this shot and still recover to Grant Nelson. As Youngblood is driving to the basket, Maluach does not engage him, nor does he pay attention to Grant Nelson, his assigned man at this time, who cuts to the basket. Maluach does not move with Grant Nelson on this play, nor does he challenge Chris Youngblood, who goes in and makes the shot.
I'm remembering this.
That drives me crazy.
Yeah.
That drives me crazy. And this is why I don't have him as high as some other people. And this is why I feel like I typically undervalue big men in general in the draft. And it really bites me because I was low on Walker Kessler. I was low on Derek Lively. And I feel like I have to say, what's my evaluation of this big man? And let me add a couple spots to where I would normally like gut check feel want to put him. I have Maluach 12 because I don't know how much I can trust him to be a independent anchor, not being dependent upon playing alongside the best player in all of college basketball, who might go on to be one of the best players in the NBA, and Cooper Flagg. What do you look like on your own when you are the anchor defensively? And it's moments like that that drive me nuts, to where I'm like, all right, cool. You can move your feet for a couple of seconds in front of the best guards in college basketball, which is not nothing. I'm not knocking that. But what are your instincts? What are you going to do at the next level when everyone moves quicker and the floor is bigger and everyone's more spaced out? How are you going to position yourself? How are you going to react to a hyper athletic guard driving to the basket with a hyper athletic forward who can cut to the basket or knock down a three, or big man? How are you going to position yourself and defend that? It's that type of stuff that drives me crazy, and why I'm going to have like this bit of skepticism in how good he can actually be at the next level. I get that you can't teach size, but there are just some big men who are really big that don't pan out at the next level, regardless of the fact that they're 7'2", 250 pounds.
For sure. Yeah, I think that's all fair. So here's my like put a bow on it thing. He statistically is so much like Yves Missi last year, where it's like wasn't trusted out of the ball a whole lot, wasn't as good as he'd like on the defensive glass, even though he's better on the defensive glass than Missi. Also better on the offensive glass than Missi. Also a guy who got knocked for his hands a lot like Missi. Except he like actually makes his free throws. Like a lot of the carryover was similar, and Missi's probably a little bit more agile, but Missi was also like a guy who was like 6'9", 6'10" with a much smaller wingspan. So like he needed to be that much more agile and mobile. Like, and at the end of the day, Missi looks like a guy who's going to play in the NBA for 10 plus years. So with Maluach, it's like, it's hard to look at that statistical profile that we just saw work really well out of the gate immediately and be like, not in my lottery. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like this seems like a really safe bet to return pretty good value no matter what. And then like, if any of the upside stuff comes along, like you're really cooking. So like, that's where I'm like still pretty high on Maluach, because I think at the end of the day, we know that this carries, and like, sure, it can be frustrating. Most centers in the NBA, if you watch them a little too much, get pretty frustrating. And I think that's where it's like, you know what, like ultimately I think this carries and travels.
It just makes me so mad that I see things that I'm clearly upset about and I don't believe in, but I have to temper my expectations because of his forebearers, so to speak, right? Like, I have him at 12, not even necessarily on his own merit, and that kind of bothers me. You know what I mean? Like, that's where I think the evaluation gets a little tricky. And I always get hung up a little bit, Maxwell, when you're like, okay, what's the sell? And you start with a measurable instead of a skill quality. You know what I mean? And I get being big matters. It does.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know. It just,
I think the finishing efficiency and the touch are something that you can like really sell yourself on. That it's like, even when he's working through those kinks defensively, it's like, as long as he can catch the ball, he's going to finish it at a super high level, and he's going to own the offensive glass. Like, he is just going to generate so many second chance points that it's hard not to think that like he just won't find his way onto the floor. So I'm into it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I have him at 12, so I don't hate his guts, but
yeah.
There are people.
There are a lot of people that have
I love and respect.
Yeah. Yes.
Exactly. You know, and I'm just like, man,
I just don't really see the upside case enough for that personally. But
like, how patient do you want to be with the 3-point shot? Do you really want him to be on the 3-point line like all that much? You know, the next. I don't know.
Let's go to the opposite side of the spectrum. Let's go to a guard who is older and is undersized. Let's go to Walter Clayton Jr. So Walter Clayton, I've waxed poetically about this guy for years, so I'm going to let you cook on this one a lot. Walter Clayton, 6'2" guard out of Florida. He is a senior. He is dominating March Madness right now. On the year, 18.5 points per game, 45.1% from the field, 39.2% from three, 87.1% from the free throw line, 4.1 assists to 2.4 turnovers, 3.7 rebounds per game, and 1.2 steals, 0.5 blocks. So that nice defensive playmaking punch that you like out of the smaller guard. I really like Walter Clayton Jr. I feel like I am not changing my evaluation of him a ton based on what we're seeing, because I feel like this is just kind of like what I thought he was. And like, it's worth noting too, he had that big takeover game against Colorado last year in the tournament where he had like 30 something. Like, this is not new for him. Like, we know that this is a guy who is not going to crumble in the spotlight, which is a real thing. I love numbers too, but some guys just really can't handle the spotlight. It is real. He's not one of them. So guard, older, undersized. How are we feeling?
You know, I've talked about it, and we put it up on our No Ceiling social media. You know, I'll never forget interviewing Brandon Pajemski. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about in the short time I had with him is Walter Clayton Jr., because we had so many fans of him at No Ceilings a couple of years ago. And Brandon was just like, yeah, he is amazing. You know, he does so many things well. And the fact that at such a young age, he's coached by Rick Pitino, and Pitino puts so much trust and pressure on him at a young age, you're seeing that kind of flesh itself out at Florida. Like you mentioned last year, no stranger to big moments. This year, his whole tournament run, Florida's whole tournament run is on the deceptively strong shoulders of Walter Clayton Jr. I think because he stayed at the early second round range for me throughout the entire season, while I've had people like enter and exit, maybe I just need to say, hey, at a certain point when a guy has consistently performed at this level and I'm looking for somebody else to just kind of like walk into the first round, maybe it should be a guy like Walter Clayton Jr. 38% on 13.6 attempts per 100 Maxwell on the season on very difficult looks. You're looking at 37% on contested threes, 37% on dribble jumpers, 59th percentile at the rim, 77th percentile as scoring as a pick and roll ball handler, 86th percentile off the screens, 91st on spot ups, 91st on ISOs. And I think he does enough on defense to be respectable. I mean, if you go through and look at the numbers, 1.7 block percentage, 2.1 steals percentage, made all 6 of his dunks, rebounds well enough, passes well enough, and makes good decisions with the ball. I have him at 24 on my latest big board submission, Maxwell. I think that he's strong enough. I think that he has good enough vision. NBA teams love guards that they can trust to string a play along and space the floor out. I mean, there's not very many shots that he can't hit. And I think that you've really seen that magnified in these comeback runs that we've seen from Florida against some really high quality teams. It's not just the shooting. It's strong side foot and the same side hand finishes against the trees in Auburn. Like he's done enough to where I think we've talked about this with a teammate, Elijah Martin. Like at some point, you just got to get some of these losers out of the way and put a guy like Elijah Martin in a position to where like NBA teams are going to want a guy like this. You know what I mean? Like I just trust him over some of the smaller guards that are younger.
It's just a lot less theoretical. Like it's just a lot less theoretical at this point. I'm in a similar boat with you. I still don't have Clayton in my first round. I think there's a chance he gets there by the time attrition sets in, Intel season, all that jazz. And again, I'm going to bring this up just because I bring it up every time with Walter Clayton. Like I've been fortunate enough to be in contact with enough people around him that I know the intel is good. If I'm wrong on that, somebody correct me. I've talked to quite a few people who've been around him in various capacities and have overwhelmingly positive things to say about him. I think that stuff is going to check out, which matters. I love the scoring. The scoring's always been awesome. I think he's a way better shooter than people realize, like just under 88% of the free throw line for his college career. Volume off the charts from deep, near 40% this year, but also a guy who lives on a really tough shot diet, like takes a lot of deep pull-ups, deep looks off the catch, a lot of shots off movement. I like that he's already playing basically in an NBA tempo system. Like the speed of the game is not really going to be much of an adjustment for him. Defensively, I like some of the playmaking tools. He's always been a guy who can like get into passing lanes, at times uses his body well on the ball. Really great shot blocker for a guard, both like as a helper. And I think he just springs really well to contest, which is something I always like. If you can just get up a little bit better when you're an undersized guard, it does make a really meaningful difference. And you see it on the stat sheet for him. I'm just like still a little leery of how like some of the traditional guard stuff stacks up. I don't love his handle. I think he is like partially a little tough shot making reliant, which you can get away with when you have that kind of touch. But I think part of it is he just doesn't like get to his spots the same way like a Jeremiah Fears does, for instance. And I, have my gripes with Fears, but you can't despite the fact that he manages to get where he wants on the court an awful lot. And as soon as he can keep his dribble alive, he's got all these counters. Clayton doesn't really have that. I think like I never know what to make of him athletically because I feel like sometimes he's like a little less athletic than I think he is. I think you see that on point of attack defense as well, where at times he's just a little too narrow and easy to get around and won't really slide his feet, opens up his hips a little bit too easily. And then I think the decision making as a passer can be a little bit basic. I think there is open opportunities that he passes up or doesn't see. If that stuff was there, I could really talk myself into a higher end outcome. I've seen a lot of Fred VanVleet, a lot of Peyton Pritchard come up the last few days. I think the passing is like where I still feel better about those guys to a degree. But I do think there is plenty of worlds where he has a long-term NBA career. I think at the end of the day, being a guy who can play off the ball, be a nuclear shooter, and then just really bust his tail defensively, that's all really valuable. And I like him better than like the other guards in that range.
Yeah, and this is why I feel comfortable having him in that 24 range. You know, it's to where I'm still respecting a lot of projection and hypotheticals with some of these other high-end talents. But once I started getting to like 23, 24, I'm like, why do I not want to get the guy who I think he's not flashy or zoomy, like jitterbuggy enough to where he's not that type of athlete, but I do like his strength. I think his handle is okay for him to be like a floor spacing guard, like second side creator, that type of thing, maybe in certain rotations. He's going to open the floor for your superstar. He's going to make passes within his capability. He's not going to be like a lead ball handler at the next level, but he's going to make good decisions. He's tough. He's competitive, and he does enough offensively. And I think even too defensively, he's only going to be like a one position defender. I think he does enough to really feel comfortable with him being a guy that you trust to make good decisions. And as you like to say, Maxwell, not get killed, in his role at the next level.
For sure. Yeah. So I think we're to firm consensus on Walter Clayton Jr. for like, dude's good. Dude's been good.
Yep.
And like, I even still in my board have him more in like, and I'm very picky about putting guards in this tier, to be clear. I have him in like the multi-year tier. Like I have him above 2-way tier, which like generally don't put guards that are not 6'3" in that tier. So for him to be there for me, that's how you know he's good. So we will take one last quick break, and then we're going to talk Milos, Uzan, and Thomas Haugh on the other side. Stick with us. Milos Uzan is back. This is a guy that I was really into a year ago. Got the chance to interview him, wrote a feature on him before the season at Oklahoma his sophomore year. Didn't have a great year. It's something that we see happen all the time. Guys have a down year and they bounce back. Found his footing at Houston. Has had a really great season. 11.5 points per game. He is 45.8% from the field, 44% from three. Same volume as last year. So that gets him to a career mark of 38.2%, 74.4% at the line. He averages 3 rebounds a game, 4.3 assists to 1.4 turnovers, 0.9 steals, and 0.1 blocks. How are you feeling about the Milos Uzan renaissance?
I'm conflicted because I do appreciate what he's done this season. You know what I mean? Like, if I love how you brought it up that he's back, because in my notes, I'm like, his buzz is like that of like a Ryan Kalkbrenner, who I have as a late first round pick, or Tyrese Proctor, who I have as like a mid to late second round pick right now. Sam Vecini of The Athletic, if you listen to his show, he's very high on Milos Uzan and is quite adamant that he's a pro. He actually mocked him to Philly at 36 in his March mock draft, which Sam is a great analyst, like on his own, but he also considers intel. So in my opinion, if Sam is projecting a guy like him, I think that there are enough NBA people who are in that camp. One thing that I like that we do at No Ceilings, though, is that Corey does this, the draft stock updates throughout the year. Milos came in at 68, which still tells me that there are people like Sam who are buying in on him. But then there are other people who, probably more like me, still want to see a little bit more, still are not as high on him as some of the other guards within this class. I do love the fact that he's shooting 44% from deep. I love his 3.1 assist to turnover ratio. That's on 4.4 assists per game to 1.4 turnovers per game. This is the second year that he's averaged 4 or more assists, and that's come on some really, really guard-heavy teams. I do like his handle and his vision. He is still pretty contact adverse, I would say. His free throw rate is at 16, 0 dunks on the year. He only ranks in the 40th percentile at the rim. Now, he does rebound better than those finishing numbers would otherwise indicate. I just think, Maxwell, that he suffers from like positional value and scarcity. Like, would you rather have the Walter Clayton Jr. that we just talked about or a Milos Uzan? I'm of the Walter Clayton variety, obviously. And then you could say, would you rather have Elijah Martin or Milos Uzan?
Yeah.
I'm of the Elijah Martin variety. So if you're having trouble dissecting like which of these sub 6'4" guards would you rather like, I don't know. Like, I do appreciate what Milos has done. I'm still calling him immediately after the draft. I want to bring him in. I want to give him some summer league run. I want to give him some G League run. He could overperform, but I just think it's positional value and scarcity. I think that he's making enough noise at the latter part of the draft cycle, which is important. I'm still not top 60, but he's like right there.
I'm in a similar boat to you. I think it's worth getting excited about because he is a really cool, interesting player. Super smart dude. Based on when I interviewed him, like son of a coach, you can obviously like see that in the way that he plays. Like he just plays a really intelligent game. In the article I wrote about him, I called him the ultimate orchestrator, and like that's still what he is. He is a guy who does an unbelievable job of organizing, running an offense, manipulating defenders. He's just so tricky. Like everything is just so like at the drop of a hat, and he processes the game at such a high level.
Even though he's a good shooter, the shot kind of bothers me because it's a line drive. So when he misses, it's bad. You know?
Yeah. What I mean? That's the thing. It's like I still don't love the volume from 3. Like okay volume this year for a guard, but it's like we just saw you miss a lot on low volume the year before. It's like I'm still not totally sold on that. I think the defense is like fine. Like it's another one of those guys where it's like you're, not totally behind the curve physically. You kind of know what's going on. You know where to be. But not a guy who's going to be super disruptive, not going to make a ton of plays, probably going to be limited to guarding ones at the NBA level just based on his body type. Unless he does measure super long or something like that. I just really only see him defending ones right now. And then you mentioned like the contact versus nature of his game. And like, that's where I would say when I wrote about him a year and a half ago to now, I would say the biggest difference is just like how I personally value these types of players after like greatly increasing my NBA consumption during that time. It's just like the classic table setting guard just isn't that valuable anymore. Like so much of offenses is just a lot more heliocentric. It's a lot more through the star, and you really don't get to dribble or make a whole lot of decisions otherwise. That's not to say that like being a point guard who pushes it in early offense and gets a quick ball screen and can make an excellent decision in that situation isn't valuable. It does have value. But I think there's a reason that like AJ Mitchell was able to supply more immediate value than like Tyler Kolek. And I think like in a vacuum, you'd be like, Tyler Kolek is like a better passer. He's better at like dribbling and like all this and that. And it's like at the end of the day, AJ Mitchell is just better at like getting from point A to point B on the basketball court and then doing something, as opposed to like Kolek, where it is like a lot more on ball usage oriented, and he's not as devastating attacking from the second side of the floor. Like I don't know how much weight to place on this type of skill set when it's not like a star level thing. And that's where I'm sure
you could even
fine, but like there's a reason that like Tyus Jones and Trey Jones, like those guys like don't get big contracts, and it's because it's like just a little easier to find these kind of guys.
You could either take that AJ Mitchell argue, or I guess like breakdown or analysis, and that's a 1v1 in terms of skill. But let's take it a step further, Maxwell. Let's take it to AJ Mitchell versus Reed Shepherd. There's also team value based on that too, where it would have been foolish for anybody last cycle to say AJ Mitchell is going to be more valuable to any team as opposed to Reed Shepherd. You would have been laughed. You would have been laughed away. What does a team need? that is drafting you. Reed was obviously drafted high enough to where he should be getting playing time. It's not always afforded because Amin Thompson is a freak of nature and one of the scariest players we've ever seen.
And it's easier to play with your offensive hub too. Like it's easier to play Amin Thompson, who's a 6'7" dude who can guard anybody and be all over the place next to Alperen Şengün, than it is to play a guy who like Reed Sheppard looks really tiny on an NBA court. Like every time I watch the Rockets, I'm just like, this guy looks small out there. Amin Thompson
had an historic offensive year.
Amin Thompson looks like he's playing a game that nobody else on the court should be playing with him at times. So yeah, like I get that. Like I think that's really fair. But I even think with Reed, like there's a more plug and play argument because it's like, well, he could shoot off the ball. Like obviously the shot didn't pan out super well in the NBA games that he played this year, at least early in the season. But it's like, yeah, there's still like complementary stuff. He could attack downhill off the catch, makes plays on defense work with Uzan. It's like the value of Milos Uzan is him having the ball in his hands. And I think that's a tricky role to scale up in.
I wholeheartedly agree.
Let's do Thomas Haugh, who is like kind of other side of the spectrum on this. He is a guy that like just feels incredibly plug and play to me. Was a guy I really liked coming out of high school. A guy I kind of liked last year, honestly, even though the shot wasn't going in. He is a 6'8", 6'9", 6'9" forward at Florida. 9.9 points per game on 48.7% from the field, 34.7% from three, 79.2% from the free throw line. Really gets after it on the glass, especially on offense. 6.2 rebounds per game and a great snap decision maker. 2.1 assists to 1.1 turnovers, 0.8 steals per game, 0.7 blocks per game. Man, I like Thomas Haugh. He's a guy that I got in the first round now. I really like what he's got going on. 6'9" guy, makes great decisions. I like do still worry about the shot a little bit. Like mechanically, it looks funky because he like
it takes a while.
The ball is kind of away from his body, and it feels like he releases it before he's at the apex of his shooting motion. Like I'm doing like an act out on camera, but it feels like the ball is like out of his hands as he's still bringing his arm up at times, which is a little odd. But he's a willing shooter. He really knows how to play within the flow of an offense, covers ground, can guard a wide variety of positions, really smart player, really determined player, really gets after it on the glass. Like the guy I think about a lot with him is Jake LaRavia, who like stumbled out of the gate the first 2 years. And then this year was just like tremendous in the doing little things roles for both Memphis and really started to click in Sacramento, where he can just Rafa Casanova, Haugh has real life lag on his jumper. Yeah, that is kind of what it looks like. But yeah, like, and LaRavia has been up and down as a shooter throughout his career, but it's a similar game, right? It's a 6'9" guy who has the tools to guard a couple positions and is super trustworthy and is going to make all those plays in the gray areas. And like those guys just find a way. They find a way to stick. I like that player type kind of across the league in general. I think another example of this, and he kind of like bounced around and had like a rough patch after a pretty promising first season, is a guy like Jeremiah Robinson Earl too, where like even if it's not like the sexiest player in the world, like these guys they can play. You can put them on the floor. They know what's happening. They compete and they will not get you killed. And I think that threshold opens up so much more than people realize versus the guy where it's like, man, he has this one awful glaring deficiency that might ruin everything for him. But if it works, it could be fine. Where like these guys that are just like 6'8", 6'9", can do a bunch of stuff, guard a few different types of players, have toughness, have feel, like they just stick around. And like Delano Banton's another one. Banton like hasn't really been on a winning team, so it's trickier. But like I just think those types of players command a little bit more value and attention than they get.
Yeah, I've been late to the party on Haugh, and when I mentioned that I detonated my big board and was like picking the pieces back up, I found myself really valuing what Haugh had done. He in the tournament has been shooting really well, with the exception of this last game where he was only 1 of 4. But you're going to have games like that. But he quietly, for at least for me, Maxwell, has been like a 35 to 36% 3-point shooter throughout the year.
Mm-hmm.
And he doesn't play like that type of an efficient shooter, if that makes sense, right? Like if you watch the highlight reel, you're going to see crazy dunks, impressive rebounds, great defensive effort. And it just so happens that he is a reliable enough floor spacer where you have to give him attention. And I think that is what makes him valuable. When you mentioned LaRavia, the big thing that stood out to me and something that I really need to see Haugh continue to improve is the handle. I think that the handle is really not that great. But I think at the NBA level, when you're looking at him being a finisher, I think that makes the role a lot cleaner. I mean, from one play, look at the Auburn game where he went from guarding Janai Broome one play, then Chaney Johnson another, then Chad Baker-Mazara another. That sort of positional versatility and winning possessions against that level of competition is insane. I mean, he's rebounding well too, an offensive rebound percentage of almost 11, a defensive rebounding percentage of over 15, and that's not being like the big men on your team. Like that's winning type stuff. I'm glad you brought up the shot because it does take, like, that's the big thing for me is like it takes a while to come off of his hands, and I think that could be cleaned up. But the decision making is good, even though the handle isn't necessarily great. 2.1 assist to turnover ratio. I think that speaks to his vision and his ability not to play outside of his abilities, if that makes sense. 17 dunks on the year. I would be interested to know how much of that is in the half court compared to the fast break, because this dude just pushes the break like none other. 64.8 free throw rate on good volume. That just speaks to the intensity, is the pressure point ability that he has on the offense. The one thing that I would be curious about, and if that I have a real hang up on Maxwell, is his defensive fundamentals, because a lot of it is based on intensity. He gets you like 4 fouls a game per 40 minutes this season. He was at 5.3 the year before. And this is why I have him at 29th, which I don't value his game like high enough, obviously, to be lottery. And I do worry about like his propensity to foul. But if you're getting him in that like mid to late first round, you're probably playing him in a rotation to where he's not going to be like heavily relied upon. So maybe he could continue to give like that crazy intensity and effort to where the fouls might not be that big of a problem. But he is like all gas all the time. I love him, dude. Like I have him late first round. Could still rise from that 29th spot, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm really into him. That'll put a bow on it for this week's episode. Steven, what have you got cooking up for the site this week?
Yeah, I've been threatening this Elijah Martin piece for a little while now, and it's finally coming around. And I think it's just like divine intervention that it's not come out until when it's going to come out this next week, because I'll have the benefit of writing about him after the March Madness tournament, which he's been killing it. And I've been putting my ear to the ground. I feel like a lot of us have recently about how teams are valuing him. And I think that the gears are turning in his favor based on what I'm getting. So I'm excited about that. I did the Saturday's Final Four preview recap show. I'm going to be doing that again tomorrow, probably around like noon 30, somewhere around there. Have to take my daughter to get braces put in tomorrow, so I'm going to be on her schedule, but it will come out tomorrow. I will preview that. So just follow us on our YouTube channel. Make sure while you're there, like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff. But I have that coming on. Maxwell, we also have people who are going to be boots on the ground for Hoop Summit coming up this week.
That's right.
And then I'll be at Portsmouth the following week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot going on, which is super exciting. Pretty boring on my front. I got a standard old article coming out tomorrow. It's a fun one. I wrote about Sion James, so I think it's really interesting.
Love that. Just
fascinating mix of like how much do you value these tools in this production versus the scalability of it coming in a reduced role. That's a fun one. Make sure you check that out. And then I will be getting to work on the Portsmouth preview. So hopefully we start to get some info as far as who's in the field. Hoping to do a player interview this week. We'll keep that one a little hush-hush just because you never know what can come up. I don't want to throw a guy under the bus if like something comes up and then he's got something he has to do.
Schedules get busy.
We'll keep that one close to the vest. So that's what's going on over here. So make sure you are following Steven at Steven G Hoops on all social media. Make sure you're following me at Bound Boards. Make sure you're following No Ceilings at No Ceilings NBA. Subscribe to NoCeilingsNBA.com. Subscribe to No Ceilings Plus for even more insights. That'll do it. We will see you all next week.
Much love, y'all.